Hey, it's me, John Beckerman, and you are watching the Letterman Podcast with Mike Chisholm. And coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. That's your bit, right? That's your bit.
That's my bit.
I'm doing your bit.
La, la, la. Welcome once again to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. I'm stoked about today's episode because it is the beginning of, I don't know, it's the beginning of a very special project that we have going here with the Letterman Podcast. Today's guest is Hillary Rollins. You may recognize the last name. Hillary Rollins is the daughter of Jack Rollins. Jack Rollins, the legendary Hollywood manager, trendsetter in the business of show. He is also David Letterman's very first major manager, and the manager that helped Dave during the morning show days, the late night days, of course. And then, we don't really go through the story of how Jack's tenure with Dave ended. I think that's something that's going to come out. It's going to come out moving forward, not necessarily even in the Letterman Podcast, but there's another project that's going to be happening. And when you hear Hillary and I talking, and by the way, we are famously, we get along famously. Introduced to her by Steve Weiner. Steve and Lori have grown up with Hillary, have known her for decades in different capacities. And I'm just really grateful. The first time I hung out with Steve and Lori, and I would ask questions about Jack Rollins. I used to talk to Shecky and ask about questions about Jack. I've always been curious about the fact that Dave has surrounded himself early on with cutting edge writers, but also old showbiz, cutting edge people, of the day, but also old showbiz. And Jack is certainly an example of an old showbiz manager, and responsible for many, many, many other careers and helping to shape many other careers, including Woody Allen, Harry Belafonte, Robert Klein, among many, many, many others, Billy Crystal. And talking to Hillary is, our friendship is evident the moment you see, and Hillary and I can talk all day. She's coming on the Letterman Podcast now. Now her relationship with the show wasn't nearly as deep as her sister Francesca, and Francesca is going to be coming on in the next couple weeks. Okay. And she was an intern there and did a whole bunch of other stuff, early late night. So she's got lots of stories. So that's going to be fascinating. Talking to Hillary gives a really good description of her dad and who he was and what he did. And we do talk about Dave, of course, and the show, but we really talk a lot about Jack here. And we've got a project that we're working on that I'm really excited about. I want to talk a little bit more about it as we move forward, but the long and the short of it is we're exploring the idea of doing a documentary on Jack. And they've asked me to be a part of that, and I'm really excited about it. And so Hillary and I, we do reference that a couple of times in this conversation. More to come on that. Lots more to come on that. Lots more podcasts to come on that. We're going to do a podcast series on Jack and have some very special guests on there. And then at that point, we're going to try and get that made into a documentary. And so we're very excited about it. I'm not going to say anything more specific other than to a point, we want to get the band back together a little bit, and some members of the band who haven't played in quite some time. And it'd be very fun to have them part of this project. And that's really all I'm going to say about that. Hillary is fantastic. I adore her. And, why are you listening to me right now? Let's get Hillary Rollins on here, daughter of Jack Rollins, the Letterman Podcast. Very proud to present the lovely and talented Hillary Rollins. All right, I'm stoked about this one. I'm really stoked about this one, Hillary. Obviously, Dad, Jack Rollins, David Letterman's first high-profile manager. I want to get into that, but I want to go through the list here because, this is not the entire list, but we think about, the definition of a talent manager in comedy. Here's the list as we go. Part of the list: Lenny Bruce, Woody Allen, Robin Williams, Joan Rivers, Billy Crystal, Mike Nichols, Elaine May, Paula Poundstone, Martin Short, Robert Klein, Tony Bennett, Jim Carrey, Dick Cavett, Diane Keaton, Martin Short, Jimmy Tingle, Howard Storm, Melissa Manchester, Stephen Wright and Andrea Martin, not even close to being the entire list. But good Lord, did your dad ever manage a lot of talent?
He did. I mean, I would say that he would argue that some of the people on that list were not actually clients, but he
Okay.
had an impact on the lives of a lot of them. And that was part of the deal with him because he really didn't work with contracts for the most part. He really worked on handshakes and let's see whether there's something I can do for you with you. So there were all kinds of people who would say, "Oh yeah, Jack Rollins was my manager," and we were like, but some officially were, and lots of other people were sort of came through. He impacted them in some way.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
the word
like
wisdom.
Lenny Bruce, he would never have
Yeah.
said I managed Lenny Bruce, but he got Bruce his first job
Okay.
in a nightclub, and that was what was management back then. So he got
He
him the
got
gig.
Lenny. Okay,
Like,
that statement though. Okay, just
right,
that statement that you just said. Okay, but he
right.
got Lenny Bruce his first job in a nightclub. Is that not the first night of modern stand-up comedy as we know it? Like, isn't that where it started right there?
Yeah, well, I like to think it is.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, yes, a lot of people were, life is, you look backwards and it's like, absolutely, he was the most influential.
um okay, so I got to ask. So growing up,
Hmm.
when did you and your sisters know that your dad wasn't necessarily like some of the other dads
Right.
around you? I know you grew up with a lot of creatives and people who were creatives and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
but your dad was cut from a different cloth. Obviously, when did you know that that was the case?
Well, honestly, I didn't for a very long time. I mean, I grew up on the Upper West Side in a very normal, to us, upper middle class family. And all the people around me were the same. You know, it was Upper West Side
Yep.
Jews west of Broadway, between Broadway and Riverside, doctors, lawyers, businessmen, actors, writers, whatever. They all had kids. They were big apartments. It was sort of. I mean, Mrs. Maisel gets it wrong, in my humble opinion. Please cut that out.
No, I'm not cutting it out. How do they get it wrong?
They didn't live it. I lived it. I mean,
Ah.
my father did work with Joan Rivers, who
Yep.
it's loosely based on, and he had mixed feelings about her and that time in his life. And my father was not necessarily a reliable narrator, as we say in the literary world,
Yep.
because he didn't work so much on contract, and he was very not a he was a genius at not being a businessman and
Hmm.
making a business out of it in a way. Um, he, he would tell his own story. Like, she was a client as far as I was concerned, and as far as she was concerned. But years later, when she pissed him off or he didn't like something about it, he goes, "I never managed her." Well, but he did. But there were others who he didn't, who was sort of those who would say he managed them. So, he had a very mixed bag with certain things. So he managed singers too, and not
Hmm.
very well necessarily. And yet, the thing that created the entire management world for my father and put him on the map was Harry Belafonte.
Yep.
And so it's a very strange, the obstacle in the path is the path kind of path. And so I would say that, um, I don't know what I was saying, but you got
No.
we growing up.
So.
So I was growing up, still in Mira lived around the corner.
Uh,
And
yep.
I knew their kids.
Yep.
We were all went to public school. We
Yep.
all went to people went to I we weren't religious, so we didn't, but I went to other kids' bar mitzvahs at Rhoda Sholem. The
Yep.
Upper West Side was just our little world, and we were normal. That's how it felt. It wasn't Hollywood. There was a
Yeah.
lot of, and my father hated LA, and we weren't in the movie business, and we didn't know from this. I'll tell you when I really noticed it though. When you were in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, and they do what does your father do for a living day?
There you go.
I would say my father's a manager because I'd ask him, "What do you do?" And he'd say, "I'm a manager." So I'd say, "A manager," and they'd go, "You mean he's a?" None of us knew what we were talking about.
Oh, he manages Stu Leonard's over there, where you get your.
Yeah, I thought, right? Was he a human resources manager
Yeah.
or? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they were like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was like, okay. So I guess I kind of wished he had a title that meant that I could understand.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a big deal. It was just like, okay, it's this thing that he does. He works with people in show business. Later on, it got really fun.
Okay, and we're gonna get there. We're gonna get
Yeah.
there for sure. But there's something about you and your sister Francesca that I found delightful in hanging out with you a couple weeks back. And the idea was, I know this is the case with you, and I think she said it as well. If it wasn't for your father, you would have been a stand-up, which doesn't surprise me even a little bit. You've got the chops, you've got the giftings, you've got the sensibility. There's no question. Spending time with you, I see it immediately. Spent a lot of time with stand-ups. I totally see that. So that being said, you coming up in a time surrounded by comedy, whether you knew it or not, maybe you're in the eye of the hurricane of comedy that was around you, but there was a sensibility there to keep his daughters away. You both, you've gone into show business in a different way, or you've let your creative spirit fly. I want to talk about that as we go through this, but the idea that you would have been a stand-up if it wasn't for your dad just tickled me endlessly. And I think your sister said the same thing. I think, or a version of it anyway. So safe to say, growing up, teenage years, you loved show business. You loved the aspect of the things that were going on around you. But did he actually say to you, "Yeah, over my dead body, will you get into this business?" Or, okay, how did that?
He really
Talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
He didn't. Neither did my mother. I think at times they thought maybe we should. But no, they always said, look, they were very straight up, and we're pretty clear about it too. As my favorite quote of his, "Look, this is a business where you can make a killing, but you can't earn a living. So if that's, but far be it for me to tell anyone that not to do it, because as my mother would say, we took the risk, we did it. If you got to do, and the other thing you always hear in the arts, and I do think it's true. I mean, I'm a writer and I'm a comedy person as well as other kinds of writing, and so is my sister. We do related things, and we kind of skirt around it. And straight up stand up would have been. I mean, it ain't too late. There are days I think, do it now. He's dead.
Next time I'm in LA, let's go to the store. Let's do it.
Well, I was thinking if I could
call Zoe.
Yeah, right. Oh, but Jesus, scary thought. But I will say this:
I want to do a dinner with you and Zoe Friedman. By the way, I think that would be. Oh my God, that's gonna be that will be a fun night when we do. That will be a lot of fun.
I don't know, and she's great. I love her. And I didn't know her much then, but I knew her parents, and she knew mine, and we knew each other's. We crossed paths so much, and now we're like, why don't we live in the same town? And she's awesome.
She's awesome.
So I mean, that's a lot of that was. I think we have a lot to say about. Because it was a very different show business. My daughter will tell you all about the Nepo babies today. We weren't Nepo babies in that way.
Okay.
Because it wasn't it wasn't the kind of career. Well, there's a lot of reasons why, I suppose.
But you know what? Hold on. When it comes to nepotism, I just got to say this. The one thing too is I think that today that term has a different meaning than it did back in the day. Now, don't get me wrong. President of the company brings in the son to groom for the position. Okay, there can be some sort of, but I've talked to so many second and third generation cameramen, so many second and third generation, folks who were on the crew. Like, there's a lot of people who just take up the family mantle, right. Because they're going to go to work with mom or dad along the way, and they understand it and they get it, and it's just part of their life, right? The same thing was with electricians or guys who drive bread trucks. It's the same deal. Some people just get into the family business.
Yeah, because that's really sort of in a way how it was, and whether you go in the family business or not, there's a price, right?
Sure.
So everybody, that's basically my parents. They, I used to kid them about thanks for the, I mean, this is typical of Upper West Side Jewish families of that generation, but you gave us piano lessons, violin lessons, tap lessons, comedy lessons, took us to theater, and then said no when we said we're going into show business. Like that's not okay. And they were post-war, and
Yep.
they didn't, they'd been through the Depression, and the fact that they did worry about our finances, but my father was very old world, and I don't think they thought we'd ever have to earn a living. We were going to get married, to men who would earn a living.
There you go.
So why not let your daughter be an artist? But it didn't really work out that way.
Speaking of the war, so he spent time in India during the war, right?
He did.
Did he ever talk about that with you?
Yeah, it was weird. It wasn't weird, but I mean, it was, my father was very much a first generation immigrant son. Like, he was the boy from Brooklyn,
Yeah,
who spoke English. When everybody else in the family, Yiddish was his first language. His parents came over from the old country. I didn't know this till years later, but he was not the first child. There was a baby born in the old country. My grandfather came over first, and sent money back, as one did, for his wife and daughter to make, and the daughter died before waiting for the boat, waiting for the money, the infant daughter. Wow. Which happened a lot.
Absolutely.
Right? And
that's why so many families had 8-10 kids, because that was the normal.
And I did not know this, because that's also the immigrant experience of put that behind you.
Yeah.
Make a new family here. Don't talk about the dead baby.
Starting fresh.
So years later, in the family, like, however, my sisters and I found out there was this baby born in the old country, and then he was very not, he didn't reflect openly much with us.
Yeah.
He was that kind of an old, and yet he did. We got it. We understood where he was coming from. So I don't know. This was apropos of something, and now I can't.
No. I asked where it's India during the war, but no,
here's what he did in India. Never ate Indian food. His experience was very much. It was a very. I don't think going. First of all, thank God he was in India and not where there was,
where the action is. Yeah.
So, but he found it very disturbing, I think. And I would always say, how could you? I love Indian food. And, like, the smells were different. The people were different. The culture shock was huge for him. Yeah. And he was also a soldier. They weren't exactly. And the other thing that was really interesting was that they had servants, because everybody did. And he was very uncomfortable with that. But you couldn't not have them. That was, you had to, that was part of the economy. And they were rich as soldiers, and he was just a poor boy, but whatever it cost. They had like a manservant. It was just a weird experience for him. And I was fascinated to hear about it. Yeah. I was like, really? My father wouldn't eat garlic. He couldn't stand it when he'd smell garlic. I was like, how could you live in New York City and not like garlic? He was just very old school and set in his ways. Yeah. And lived in that kind of,
the bubble.
That bubble of of whatever that was for him. So,
and then he goes and has this old world guy goes and has 3 strong daughters who marrying well is the least of their concerns.
Yeah.
And
not the least, but not the most either.
I can imagine the 3 of you stretched him considerably in your own ways. More so than the talent in many ways that he dealt
Probably.
with.
And many people understood that he was, better equipped to be a father to the talent than he was to these 3 daughters, which I can see in retrospect with a lot of love. It wasn't necessarily fun at the time. We don't get into that now, but
sure.
Yeah.
When will we get into that? Oh, wait, we can talk about that. We can talk about that. More to come. Yeah. More to come. So growing up, you stated earlier Well, wait a second. Later on, though, I really, really liked that world. What age were you when that world started to become sort of appealing? And oh my goodness, Dad's part of something that's going to lead to some pretty awesome experiences. How old were you at that point? Were you a teenager enjoying
I
those
was
times?
probably a preteen.
Oh
And,
man. Okay, good.
and even, I mean, I had my, unhappinesses that were family and personal, and Dad's business didn't have any impact on how I felt.
Sure. Everybody
But,
does. Absolutely.
but I
Absolutely.
had like my 11th birthday party at the bitter end.
Jesus. Really?
Because I was in New York, because of that connection. I went to a Beatles concert when I was 8.
Okay.
I got to experience things that seemed cool, but I didn't know how cool they were until other people started reflecting back how cool they were.
Yeah.
Then I could take friends to a Beatles, like not a
There
Beatles
you
concert,
go.
but to the nightclubs with me,
Yep.
to see comedy. So I was doing that younger than anybody who didn't grow up in it would have, for sure.
Who were some of the artists back then
10,
that
11,
you
12.
that you liked? At 10, 11, 12. Who were some of the artists back then?
11,
Like
12, it was more about music for me. Like, for instance, for a short while, this is a funny story, I think. Because I'm in music now to some degree, I'm a songwriter.
Yep.
My father managed a rock band for a little while.
Yeah.
And which was not his, but by then the management company had enough fingers and enough pies, and comedy had started being opening acts for rock and roll and vice versa. And that
Yep.
was that was a big change in the comedy world. That's the pre-Letterman, really. That's the Robert Klein years, and that
Yep.
was really kind of, and Melissa Manchester and those connections, because her husband was a manager in my father's company.
Yep.
So there were like, the management company grew and became a production company and other things as well. And at that stage, and he did on and off have singers in his world. And
Yep.
he always said, my father was interesting about music. I will tell you, my mother was a singer, and my mother was very musical, and we grew up very steeped in musical theater and even some opera and pop and Beatles and all that stuff. So that was as much of an influence, being the age and the time and the place we were in our young years. And my father, I always had the feeling that he would not notice if music disappeared.
Oh, interesting.
Now, he didn't dislike it.
No.
He appreciated it.
And he could spot talent. He could spot the talent for it.
Spot talent. He understood people's responses. And one of the reasons I think when he could spot talent for it, I think because, the best musicians and musical experiences are not just about the music, they're about the delivery of the music.
Yes.
Right? They're about the way people receive the music and hear the music and the experience they have. And when that's working, it's its own magic. And so he understood that magic, naturally understood it.
He's the one that told Harry Belafonte to sing Calypso, right?
Yes. And so there he was. He understood the talent.
Yeah.
But he understood it not from a musical point of view necessarily.
Yeah. Logical rather than emotional.
No, I'd say more holistic.
Oh, that's an even better way. Okay.
I think he saw, now you could look at it now as racist that he told him to sing Calypso. But at the time, Harry was, as my father said, the handsomest man. My parents, he was the handsomest man, maybe the handsomest man anyone's ever seen. So I don't know if there was racism. It wasn't racist in my viewpoint, but
no,
it was a world in which a Black man had a different path potentially as a singer. And he was a nightclub singer. This is how the story was told in my opinion. And he was doing okay, but he wasn't special enough. He wasn't going to be, you look at the Black nightclub singers at the time, like,
Sammy Davis Jr.
Sammy Davis.
Yeah.
The talent is, I personally, I don't think anybody surpasses that talent.
Yeah.
Certain talents that you're like, well, of course that person had to succeed at that. It was like the gift just goes through them.
But Harry had something else. Like when you look at his Tonight Show stuff, Like Harry had an all-roundness to him, and Sammy did. I mean, who am I comparing? Like we're comparing
Right.
giants, right? But Harry had this smooth silkiness to him
He
that could
did.
translate
Harry
to
was
all
a
these other
snap. Yeah.
areas.
But I think that at the time, but success wise,
Yeah.
to try and carve out a career in smooth nightclub world when it was Peggy Lee
Yep.
or Sammy Davis, he was just another singer.
You got to stand out.
Yeah. And I think what my father saw was, okay, you're a good enough singer. You're a good singer. You're incredibly handsome.
Yep.
And you have this exotic, what we now would look at as racist to take advantage of the exotica of it. But he was like, no, sell who you are, sell the island thing. And a lot was going on at the time too. There was a big push by the Library of Congress to collect folk songs and folk music in this country and worldwide. I mean,
Yep.
folk music was not, it was commercially viable. The Weavers, the pop, it was a pop. You could be a star and make a lot of money with this folk music in a way that you can't anymore.
Yeah.
Folk was pop. And it was like roots and music and create your own. So he helped create the myth of, and that's part of what it is myth making, right? It's storytelling.
Yeah.
That's what management is, as opposed to getting someone a gig. He would dress people. He would not at the beginning. I mean, he didn't have to do that, but it was like they were a marriage. They were a partnership in creating an act.
Yep.
And the act was the music, the look, the behavior, the set. It was like it is still, but it's not. It's not. It's been institutionalized differently now. It wasn't institutionalized then.
Well, some would say though the blueprint that he and Joffrey, like everybody, but at that time, but he was the trendsetter and the guy who built the blueprint that others recognized is systemizable. Oh, what Jack is talking about here, just naturally off the top of his head or from his heart or from the holistic. I love that word holistic. I think that's a great way of putting it. We can take that and we can repeat that. We can systemize it. We can actually come up with a formula. And if you look today, Endeavor and all these big companies, gigantic companies, that were rooted in management of talent and the powerhouses they have become.
Right.
There is an argument to be made that it started with Rollins and Joffrey. Joffrey, sorry.
It's okay, but they're gonna catch on that one.
They'll get. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Rollins and Joffrey, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I'm, I try to be objective because I don't want to just, blow, because I was, we don't blow our own horn that easily in this family, but I think that's fair, and my father would probably not have agreed to that until the very end of his life. In retrospect, he would never, he shrugged when you said that, but then he didn't. Then he tells the story about there was no such thing. So he begrudgingly would agree. And I think that there's a lot of management and talent today, because so when I came up, one of the things that was fun was when I was only 18, what was I, 20? I was working as a waitress in a comedy club, and I brought my father in. I set up a showcase for a bunch of young comics. So I was like playing manager.
Do you remember any of the names on that bill?
Oh yeah. This is who I brought him. Jerry Seinfeld. I was good. I am good. I inherited my father's eye and my father's, and I still do it a lot. I do it with people, but I do it in a different way.
Yeah.
And I can start fucking monetizing it. Can I just say that? Because I spend a lot of my time and energy on it. Yeah. So I get that side of it.
Okay, Seinfeld, you led well. That's a good list so far.
He turned Seinfeld down, which is always one of my favorite stories.
Wow.
He did not want Seinfeld. And years later, I said, Dad, you think you were wrong about Seinfeld? And he said, nope.
What?
He said, I'm very happy for him. I would not have been the right manager for him.
Oh,
That
there
was
you
my
go.
father's genius too.
By the way, Mitzi Shore
And
also
that,
turned down Jerry Seinfeld at the Comedy
okay,
Store. Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
And I will take that, and it's the right thing to do, because
Because you don't feel it. It's not real. It's not organic.
It's got to be like a marriage.
Yeah.
He felt it. He saw it. He knew Jerry had the, you know, the material, and he saw the path. He said, it's not for me.
Yeah, he had the gift. It's just not Jack's gift.
Yeah.
It's somebody else's gift.
It's somebody else's gift.
Yeah. It's George Shapiro's gift.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's right, because look how well Jerry did,
Yeah,
rock
absolutely.
on.
Were George Shapiro and your dad friends?
I don't know.
All right. That's something we should explore.
Yeah.
We should explore that.
Good question.
We should explore that as we look
They
into
were all
different
younger.
projects.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so started with Seinfeld.
But
Who else? Who else? Oh, yeah.
My daughter worked briefly worked at Brillstein.
Yeah.
And Brillstein, I didn't know, but I know that Brillstein very much said, I'm modeling myself on Jack Rollins. I mean, down the road, it's a terrible place now, I hear, but I think that was sort of the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, we're going to get to that because it went from David Letterman to Mike Ovitz, and you talk about next generations, and you talk about somebody who took the blueprint that was there and blew it up in his own way with his own, so we're going to get to that. I still want to go back to this bill that you created. What was the Comedy Club? And then Jerry Seinfeld was the first one. Who else?
Okay. I won't remember them all, but I'll do the best I can. Seinfeld, Larry Miller. Do you know Larry?
Yep.
I remember the lineup. I just don't remember names because
I'm
stoned. But let's try it again. Give me some cues here. We got Seinfeld, Larry Miller. There were no women. Think about that.
Yep.
There was maybe one woman comic that I knew then. I mean, honest to God.
Larry David?
No, Larry David was not, because Larry David mostly worked at the Improv. And we were at the comic strip.
Right.
And I was at the comic strip as a waitress. So I was able to set up a showcase there because I was an employee there, and I knew everybody and they knew me. And so they were like, sure. I wouldn't have gotten the job if my father hadn't been Jack Rollins.
Okay.
I was an inexperienced waitress and I was a fucking loser, but I learned real quick.
How old were you at the time?
I was 20.
20. Okay, so 20. We all know we were like when we were 20. That being said, how many of those talent though went, hey, hold on a second. That girl that was just serving screwdrivers to table 5, that's Jack Rollins' daughters. Like,
it was a lot of them, and it was a mixed bag for me because I was at dating age, and comics are funny, and I'm and adorable, and they're also fucked up.
Yep.
And so I never knew if somebody wanted to go out with me because of me, or I wanted to go out with them because of them, or they wanted my father. That was always loaded.
Right.
Loaded. On top of it, when I started, I realized later I was so obnoxious. I mean, I ended up being a good waitress, and I loved that job. But I was pretty entitled about, like, I didn't know what I was doing. Nobody really knows. We were supposed to be singing waitresses when they opened. That was their thing. I wasn't any of these things. I came in the youngest. Everybody else was at least over 21. Only in New York could you be serving drinks at 20 legally in those days. You wouldn't even be able to do that now. So I was just an idiot. I was a good idiot, but I was really good at certain things. And when it came to that, my point is simply that the people that I hung out with were it was very club centric in those days. A lot of guys played all 3 clubs.
Yep. Yeah.
There was a real community around improv, comic strip, and catch. And I hung out with, but I did end up as a waitress at improv eventually. But this was doing and they were kind of different things. So I knew Larry, and I liked Larry. I was like trying to have a conversation with Larry. Couldn't look at the guy and have a conversation. He couldn't do it, or at least not me.
Really?
Oh, it was, I don't know what it was. I was too young to. I've been at the time. I just thought, oh, fucking comedians,
Yeah.
you know. But I think now it was just. I still sort of think that, but it's, you know, whether it was, you know, on the spectrum or just whatever it was, he was a piece of work to have a
I,
conversation with. But he was one of the funniest men I ever knew. I loved his stand-up. Loved Larry David's stand-up.
I love hearing stories about Larry David's stand-up.
It was
You know, the
best.
famous one about him, you know, coming out not liking the cut of the audience's jib and basically yelling at the audience and then turning around and walking off stage.
He was just, I mean, all of these originals who were so, you know, original.
Yeah.
He'd come out and do this bit about people, Samoans. They're not people, they're pancakes. They got those brown face. I mean, just
Oh no.
crazy shit. And he was the funniest man I ever. I mean, there were a couple people like that. What's his name? But they were different. He didn't play over at the
Yeah.
comic strip. Because they had different bookers and they had their favorites and who could give you a good spot and all of that.
Yep.
So that's the long answer.
But then you had the guys and gals, but you know, more so guys back then, a lot more so guys back then, who, like you said, they would try and do, you know, they'd try and work
Yeah.
multiple times a night because of the craft. They wanted it like
They
Seinfeld's
did
a
it.
very good example of that, how he would try and get sets 3 or 4 times a night if he possibly could. Eddie Murphy would do the same thing when he was coming up. Like different folks would go and do that. And you have an interesting vantage point because you would see some of the people who were maybe content going once or twice a week just in your spot versus
Mhm.
some of the folks who were like really going after it, and you got to watch all of that.
Jerry Seinfeld, and again, I don't want to. I don't want to say something on camera. It's not negative, really,
No. Okay.
but it was honest to my experience at the time because I have
Yep.
great admiration for Jerry. I think he's incredibly talented, and I think the show was one. To this day, I watch it going. I don't watch it that often, but when I do, I go. It's still funny, you know. It makes me laugh.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's brilliant.
Yep.
It's just, each time you go, this is so original. You couldn't have seen it coming. It's a life-changing piece of work.
Yep.
And Jerry gets credit for it as much as Larry and all of them, for sure.
Absolutely.
But he has ice water in his veins. Or that was always my experience, that he was 100% had ice water in his veins,
Yeah.
which is a good thing to have if you want to make it in show business.
Yeah, you hear no that many times. You go on that many, especially for a stand-up too. I mean, okay, there's the hearing no that many folks who are on the acting side of things get, you know, the rejection, but then also to get rejected by, as you're developing material, to go on all these bombing runs to find one little piece that can be used for a bigger whole. I mean, yeah, yeah, the
And what
idea
I
of having
never-
ice water in your veins.
Yeah, and I don't know that's even fair or true
Hmm.
to his friends and his wife and his kids and all that. I'm just saying that
No,
he was
professionally, you're saying
invested.
professionally,
Well,
professionally.
especially at that age. He was
Yeah.
like 19.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew who he was and what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
He did it with. So I knew him when he was with his college girlfriend,
Mhm.
and she was a sweetheart, and she was really heartbroken by him. And we're all heartbroken by our college sweethearts. We're not supposed to be
Yep.
with them
Yep.
long term. But at the time, it was clear that he was like, this is what matters to me, and being married to you is not of interest to me.
Yep.
You
The
know,
priorities of a
going down
stand-up
the
hell
road
bent, and
with-
he's he's one of
And
many
he was-
stand-ups
right.
who would have that exact same blueprint. The love of
and
the
was
craft
really
is higher than anything.
comfortable, right? And was
Yeah.
really comfortable, like, delaying all that and being like, just very. Well, that's what I meant by ice water. Very, I wish I had more of that myself. But
Laser focus
Laser
towards
focus.
goals. Yeah.
Yep.
Who are some of the other? We're setting a very, very nice stage for Letterman. By the way, speaking of Letterman, I don't know if you knew this or not. Jerry was one of the only stand-ups who was allowed to go on Carson's Tonight Show and Late Night with David Letterman.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if you knew that or not. He was one of
I
the
did not.
if not the, he was one of the only ones that could do both shows, and it was okay with everybody. So that just shows the appeal of Jerry, because if you look at the comics that appeared on the Tonight Show, and that was its own ecosystem, and you look at the comics who appeared on Late Night with David Letterman, during that time, because the Tonight Show, I mean, obviously the run was, a lot bigger than when Late Night was on after it, but Tonight Show comics were different than Late Night with David Letterman comics.
Right. Oh, for sure.
Did you
For sure.
like?
I did not know that, in the sense that I was not, I've told you this, but I watched a little Letterman, but I was not a long Letterman viewer.
Yeah, you and your sister were completely opposite in that regard, whereas she, became an intern on the show and all that sort of stuff. Like, well, and we'll have Francesca on here to talk about that. But,
right. And I think 5 years made a big difference.
Yeah,
Because
the age difference.
That age difference, we weren't 2 years apart, we were 5 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
It's huge of what's culturally, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
I was already just done with that piece of of following it. Like, I'd done comedy in a way. Like, I'd been 5 years a waitress, 12 years a slave.
Before we get to Dave here, I got to ask about Woody beforehand. So in your teenage, okay, so I'm trying to do the timeline in my head when Woody starts winning Oscars and starts becoming Woody Allen. Like, when your dad found him, obviously he was a stand-up, unrefined, all of that sort of stuff. And he really, really helped Woody. And I've got dozens of quotes from Woody here, really, really helped refine and direct Woody on all of Woody's films. I believe up until very recently anyway. Rollins and Joffe were in the the credit produced by. Woody Allen is a force of nature from a creative standpoint. I don't think that can be denied. As in your formative years, did you like Woody Allen movies?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say they're right too.
Fuck yeah. Well, first of all,
you're the target audience, I would think.
Well, first of all, Annie Hall is a classic.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, whatever else you think of any of the Woody Allen story, you cannot deny that. No one can.
Mm-hmm.
It is a great rom-com. When I hate rom-coms.
Oh,
I don't hate them all, but I'm suspicious of rom-coms. Often.
There's the stand-up right there coming out. That's it right there. That's that sensibility. That's one of those sensibilities right there. Yep.
Get me started. Yeah, I'm a little suspicious of the old rom-com. And chick flick was something I had to grow up hearing, right?
Yep.
And now it's very chic to be a rom-com. Well, it was a fucking chick flick, and it was a put down, and it was a lie. Nobody finds true love with the person they hated at the end of the day, So it became so formulaic, and there's a place for it, but
sure.
And I don't hate them all, but one of the reasons I tend to be very suspicious is that Annie Hall is so fucking good.
Oh, there we go.
Postmodern. It changed what it meant to be a rom-com.
Yep.
And it does not have a happy ending, and it has some of the greatest fucking writing and directing and conceiving of quirky bullshit life. It's groundbreakingly great movie, in my opinion, and it won an award when no comedies won that award. And can I just be a little bit pissed off for a minute here at the Academy?
Yeah.
Do you know that when my father died at 100, after accepting the award for Annie Hall as Best Picture, which was an absolute dark horse in every sense of the word, including that Hollywood hated Woody Allen, hated New York, my father hated Hollywood, and they'd never made a comedy Best Picture. It was against every fucking odds, and I was there. I got to go to that awards. That's another story someday. Not a great experience for me, but anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, another story.
Yeah.
And when my father died, that year in the Oscars in memoriam, he was not in the in memoriam.
Really?
He was 100 years old, too. He also produced TV as well as film. So even if Hollywood hated him,
The Academy should have, yeah,
The
absolutely.
Academy, you know, he was, and we called them the next day. We were furious. We were like, wait a minute, cameramen, publicists, people
Yep.
you've never,
Yep.
there was no, you know, really. And they said, well, a lot of people died this year.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Okay. And they said, he's on the website, but we couldn't put everyone in the film. So
Wow.
I just thought, okay, that is the Hollywood story.
Hmm.
And my father, by the way, my sister, she called him, and then I said, you know what? Dad wouldn't have given a shit.
Yeah.
We gave a shit. We felt
Yeah.
it was a slight and just wrong. Like we needed it. We kind of needed it. We wanted to see it up there, and we
Mhm.
got plenty of other positive blah blah blah. I'm not,
Yep.
but you know, it was just like surprising and yet not.
Yeah, that's surprising to me.
Yeah.
I wonder if some sort of project could go after the Academy for an honorary something or other down the line. That would be kind of interesting to see that happen.
I don't think it's even necessary, but I do think it is. I just think it's part of the story.
Yeah, well, that's a good way of looking at it. I love that. So Annie Hall, to you, like it was funny because talking to you, to the contrast between your sister about Letterman, well, I showed her, somebody gave me the one of the original Late Night with David Letterman jackets, and I showed the picture of it when we were at dinner, and she's like, "Oh, I got some of those," and she was like really really ramped up to start talking about the Letterman stuff. Would it be safe to say that her enthusiasm on the Letterman side, your enthusiasm for the Woody Allen side, would be sort of applicable? Like, is that?
No, no. My enthusiasm for stand up,
Mm-hmm.
here's what I would do. I would go every night to the clubs before I
Mm-hmm.
was working as a waitress there, when I was too young, when I
Mm-hmm.
needed to get up for school. If Klein was doing sets to break in material, my father would take us all, and then that would be, you know, fine. And then he'd have to go back every night. And
Yeah.
I'd say, please, can I go again? Please. My mother would say, you have school tomorrow. It's Sunday. It's Tuesday. And I go, I promise I'll get up for school. And I never did. I always, you know, fucked up that up. And my younger sister was too young then,
Yeah.
you know. My older sister, who was only 3 years older,
Mm-hmm.
and was also you know, she was a dancer and she was brilliant and arty, but this wasn't, she said, why would you go again? You saw it. I said,
Mm-hmm.
it's different every night. It's live. Comedy's different every night. So is music, really, if it's live. But
Yep.
and she said, and I'll see a movie once. I am not this generation that goes, oh, let's watch that again.
Yeah.
Oh, I've seen it.
Yep.
Maybe 30 years from now I'll watch again. You know, but comedy is
Stand
live,
up's different. Yep.
music is live, stand up is different, and I couldn't get enough. And I was a writer. You know, I was born to be I probably would have done stand up. I wasn't doing stand up, but I was creating the the material inside me for writing. You know,
Yes.
I got the same thing. I watch stand-ups because they're writers,
Yep.
right? And I understood the sensibility, and I wanted more, and I wanted more. Feed me, feed me, feed me.
Well, okay, so here's the other part. Like I could watch if Burr was on a when it was on a 5 night run somewhere, in a small club, I would want to go and watch Burr all 5 nights because I would want to watch him develop the material. I would want to watch the tweaks and see if I could hear the different tweaks between some of the words, the emphasis on certain syllables, whatever it is. I would love to hear the process of the evolution of a bit. It seems like that was right up your alley.
Right up my alley.
There you go. There you go.
It was right up my alley, and it was right up my dad's alley. And
Oh,
so
that's
those were
interesting.
the things, that was something we really shared.
Yeah.
And he, you know, they let me go. They argued, but they sort of shrugged and got it. That okay, that's what it's her jam.
Yeah.
You know, it was part of my jam for sure. So, yeah.
No, go ahead. No, you
So
got.
I would say that by the time of Letterman, I was just in my 20s, and internships, you know, it was beyond that.
Yeah.
I was busy trying to get something going for myself.
Safe to say you dug writers. You enjoyed writers and what they do.
Always.
Like, yeah, always. Did you ever have any?
Writers and musicians. All my boyfriends were either keyboard players or writers. not by choice.
Did you ever
Or
spend
direct.
any time with Meryl Marco?
I didn't, and I wish I had. I did
Yeah.
not know her. I was very impressed at the time that there was a woman head writer, as
Yeah.
everyone was. It was
Yeah.
unheard of. I was a little jealous. I was a little, only just because I wasn't even writing then yet, but I was like, really? That's possible.
No, yeah.
And there was a little snarly narc that I look back and go, wow, was the world fucked up? I was like, well, of course Meryl Marco's the head writer. She's his girlfriend.
Oh, yeah.
And so unfair.
Wow. And then you realize that the genius that is there is, oh man. Yeah.
So in years later, I never really had, I don't think I ever met her. But I reached out, I think when my father died, something, we had a Facebook thing or some kind of a thing. And I said, and she was very nice. And I I'm a fan.
Mhm.
I don't follow her, but I would like to read more of her. And I think
She's got a great Substack. I highly recommend it.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, I
okay,
would
so
say but
now
I
let's
knew a lot of the other, I do some of the other women,
yeah.
Oh, there were a couple of women who were so great, and one of them died young. Did you, I can't think of her name now. Most of the women stand-ups were gay that
Mhm.
I knew, and that was before they were coming out.
Yeah.
It was a male world.
That is a very different time when you describe that, and
It was
the
a
evolution,
very male world. Yeah.
the evolution that you've seen in stand up.
Huge.
Yeah, it's amazing
I
to
mean,
see.
Elaine Boozler was the first postmodern woman stand-up, and the
Mhm.
only one.
Mhm.
And I was a huge fan, and I still am.
I'm trying to get her.
But
I'm desperately trying to get her on the show.
oh, she'll
Um,
come.
oh
She'll
wow,
come.
yeah. I haven't reached out in a while. I'll reach out. I'll reach out again,
Well,
and
Tara, I said
see.
she should come because I saw her not that long ago at a comedy thing, and she was always really warm to me, and I really am a fan and love her. And just put in a word, say Hillary Rollins
Absolutely.
should really do it.
Well, and so we talked about this. I forget who it was with. But anyways, a recent episode we talked about like someone like Bette Midler. Like when Bette
Right.
came up through the clubs and whatnot, and it's funny when you're the line that was said in the episode. I forget who said it was. You know, if you're going to be the tip of the spear, you got to be sharp. Like I think about women like her. I think about women like Sandra Bernhardt. I think about women who,
Right.
you know, as they were
Right.
coming up to trend to carve the path in this
Right.
jungle for others to follow. Man,
100%.
you know,
100%. And that's why, for better or for worse, the handful, like Phyllis Diller.
Yeah.
Okay, people, I think she was a genius.
Yeah.
I think she was a genius. Now, would I want to see her do that material today? No.
Of course not.
But she was balls out taking it on. And so was Joan.
Yep.
And so was Elaine. And there's a very
Yep.
direct lineage. And you can see it with the same thing with Seinfeld. And, you see that lineage. And these are the shoulders we stand on. I think that
Yes.
would be an interesting, place to look at, a comparison of that, the male and female lineage to today when it's just a genderless world sort of comedy.
Yeah, it's funny. I think about that all the time. I think about material. I love going back and looking at old stuff and comparing it to the new. And I'm not a guy who I'm a guy who very, very easily can understand the fact that different time, different lens, different time. Like I'm really good at that.
A lot of
and
young
not
people are very triggered, and it's like, grow up.
yeah. It's frustrating to see that because that's just it. My wife and I just went to France not too long ago. And I mean, like if some of the stuff that we saw in France was in America, it'd be torn down and ripped apart and all this sort of stuff. Whereas the French just like, hey, here's what happened. And they describe the statue that we're looking at and the atrocities around it. And it's like, okay, that was the time. Atrocities. Oh, got it. Let's not do atrocities again,
Right. I get it. I sort of get it. I did get it to some degree with the Southern American stuff. But only to me, the solution was for everywhere that you had a Confederate thing, you also erect an anti-Confederate.
Yeah.
Like you elect an African-American anti-slavery.
There
Here's
you
what
go.
really happened. Like this is history.
Yes. And unless we know it and face up to it, we're doomed to repeat it. Right.
And ripping it out to me was sort of like, it was performative, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And it
And
becomes
that
something. Yeah.
bothers me. You know, I mean, I know I can get criticism. I say stuff on podcasts that I would never say anywhere else.
That's the
But
beauty
no
of
one's gonna
podcasts.
hear it.
That's why the medium. That's exactly right. That's our bread and butter, where the good stuff
Right.
comes out and nobody hears it. It's perfect. I love it. It's the best medium of all time.
Well, it's you preach to the converted. That is, if they're there listening, it's because they want to hear what you have to say.
There you go. Exactly. Yes. But
Which
I
is
think
what
about, to go back to the original point though, I think about like Robert Klein, his opera pimp bit is incredible. Like the opera pimp, and if you think about the opera pimp today in 2024 and he does the opera pimp, perfect, converts completely. It is
hilarious.
It's the perfect bit because it is timeless, because everyone still knows what a pimp is, everyone still knows what opera is, and combining the two concepts is just genius now, like it was genius then. And then you get some pieces like you look at some of Rodney's stuff, and Rodney's stuff would never play now. Unless it was some sort of a reactionary, a revolutionary thing, because the pendulum swings, but then watch out, because the pendulum's going to swing back, right? And we saw it. I saw it growing up. Andrew Dice Clay. I want to ask about him, because he took this one character that he had in an act full of many different characters, and then this one character, the Dice Man, goes and blows up, and he's fucking selling out MSG in the 90s.
I had no idea that he had other characters.
Oh, see, there you go. Yeah.
Andrew Dice Clay, not interested. That's where the world's going in comedy today. Not interested.
And that was the Dice. That was one character that he had of multiple characters. Like he's really, really, really talented. But that one there, for whatever reason, it hit the right nerve or the wrong nerve, whatever you want to look at it.
Yeah,
and
it's cultural. There's a zeitgeist always, and there's a massive movement, and it's like why Letterman hit when Letterman hit, and before that, why Dick Cavett hit when Dick Cavett hit.
Yeah,
because we were in a different cultural moment.
Dick's an amazing guy.
Dick is an amazing guy.
He is, yeah. Boy, what a combination of wit and charm and vocabulary and talent. Oh my God, that is
and
just
humility, even though people don't think so. But he does have humility. I've never found him to be somebody who didn't understand where he fit in things.
Anybody who's willing to do this show has humility. I'll just say that.
And he's a great magician. I love it when he does a card trick. That was my favorite thing about knowing him a little bit growing up, was that wherever you go, if you could get 5 minutes alone with him, he'd do a card trick. Who doesn't love magic?
Right?
I love magic.
Well, that's Altman as well. Altman's the same deal. Did you know Jeff at all? Did you know Jeff Altman?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I met him. Yeah. But I met him, but I didn't know him.
Yeah, same thing. Magician. Like he just, I adore Dick Cavett so much. And I love comparing the Titans of talk show. Tom Snyder, loved him as well. And you talk about conversation and how he was more just the conversationalist. Dick Cavett seemed to be able to do it all. Also an expert of the pommel horse. I don't know if you knew that or not, but quite the athlete back in the day.
That makes sense, because he's at that little tight muscular kind of frame that would be somebody who would do great in gymnastics.
There you go.
Seriously.
There you go.
That makes perfect sense. His wife was a trip too.
Yeah.
Do you
back
never
then?
knew?
No.
Yeah. She was amazing. She was an actress and beautiful and very, very
smart.
Very smart.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know her well. She was very mysterious to me, but she was exotic to me, because she was nothing like my mother. She was this very, elegant, exotic, non-Jewish actress, professional actress who didn't have kids, didn't want kids, and was just kind of fascinating to me.
Okay, so let's get to the place where you've done a really good job setting the table as to where you were, what you have seen at the time that Jack came into David Letterman's life. And it's really interesting when you go through Dave's history with managers and whatnot. Um, do you remember when Jack came in to David Letterman's career? Do you remember hearing about it? What was your first memory of
Yes.
hearing about David Letterman?
So I was in my early 20s, and as I said, I'd left the comic strip. I wasn't waitressing anymore. I was moving forward or out of that a little bit.
Yep.
And so it was like another thing that Dad did. It was like, great, they did a lot of things. But I understood at the time, what I understood at the time was, that he didn't find Letterman, that his partner did,
Okay.
first of all.
Yeah.
And Letterman was a weatherman in the Midwest and a stand-up.
Mhm.
And they saw kind of whatever it was, they were bringing in. My father wasn't talent scouting anymore. He was like,
Yes.
so, but if they saw something, I don't know what the story was, but the younger managers were like, this guy wants to, we think, and he had a lot of qualities that they were very good at what they did too,
Sure.
for the most part.
Yep.
And to be honest, my father was very gifted at certain things and not so good at other things. And his partners, like any firm, there were different strengths. And so I think I can't remember who it was who found him, which partner, or whether a couple of them together, or whether Letterman reached out to Rollins and Joffe. Perhaps that's what
Yeah.
happened, most
Yeah.
likely. But he didn't seek it out. But it was this interesting deal because he was so Midwestern.
Yep. As was Johnny, as was Dick, as was,
And let's be honest, talking about the truth of it, there was no place for ethnic in late night or talk show
No.
at all.
No.
No place for women, no place for anything that was not bland enough in the eyes of the networks and the American zeitgeist to allow everybody else to have all that other cultural stuff could go through. But the person sitting behind the desk
Yep.
had to be a white, bland, not bland, but not bland. None of them were bland. They were all
No, but
talented.
American. No, because
He had to be
America
American.
is not bland. And I don't think America has ever been bland, but it had
No.
to be an American, a stereotypical American of the time.
You
With talent.
You couldn't sell the show without that kind of an anchor.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And Letterman seemed to have a lot of potential, clearly.
Yes.
So it was a good find, right?
To your knowledge, had he already done his Tonight Show shot at that point? He had already done his Tonight Show stuff, right?
I don't know. What I
Okay.
remember was that I became aware of him when it was the daytime show.
Okay.
And the daytime show was I was like, really? Who's going to watch a daytime show? And basically I was told nobody, but they're going to audition him on a daytime show. And as soon as they see that he's not a daytime show, that'll be his audition. And I was like, okay. And it was, and they immediately took it to the nighttime. Great. And everybody thought, as you know, that was the beginning of the path to Carson.
Yep. Yep.
And it was a done deal, I think.
That is an interesting
done deal.
I
mean, I wasn't inside it, but as a young person watching it who was enough inside it, I was like, well, yeah, that's how I get it now. They're grooming him for that. But then Dave created, its own.
Yeah.
He turned out to be more interesting than that.
Yeah, he created his own ecosystem within the talk show world. And really, at the end of the day, if Carson was the blueprint at that point, Dave became the blueprint. And if you look at the shows today, how many of the shows have elements of zaniness that, and it can go back to Steve Allen. Steve Allen had
Yeah.
that. Like,
And
there's no
before,
question. Like,
and it goes back to Johnny Winter and
yep,
Jonathan
Jonathan
Winter.
Winters, absolutely.
People breaking, Steve Weiner will tell you all the ways that the fourth wall were broken by the comedian, the early TV comics, and it's
Yep.
true. And Letterman was not inventing the wheel, but he
No.
was hitting it at a moment in a cultural shift from, it's the Reagan years,
Yep.
and that meant something.
Yep.
It was so smart we're dumb.
That, yes. Oh, that's a great way of putting it. Absolutely. I love the way you put things.
Well,
Yes.
I'm a writer, but thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, it's
Yeah.
but I just love some
And
of the,
everybody's like, yeah, we want to be dumb. We're not dumb. We're so smart. We're dumb.
exactly. And the other part is we are going to make fun of celebrity in a way that has never been done before.
Right.
We're going to absolutely lampoon, one
We're
of the
taking
things
no
that,
prisoners. And also there was no, here's the thing that I really noticed changed in comedy. The Jewishness of comedy, that is the poor me, I'm a victim, I'm the butt of the joke,
yep.
became very unpopular in that realm.
Yep.
The comedy went from being laughing at me or with me to I'm laughing at you. That was the Harvard boy change, right? In the
Yep.
80s.
Absolutely.
The Harvard boys. Remember
Yeah.
the Harvard
Oh yeah.
boys?
The lampoon,
Like,
the pipeline.
and that was the pipeline, and it hadn't been a pipeline before. The pipeline before that had been Jewish, and
Yep.
not and by Jewish I mean not Ivy League, not
Yeah.
not the main culture, the subculture, right?
Yep.
Just
Yep.
jazz, right? And
Yep.
when the white cultural elite started building television and film on their terms out of humor, when they'd been building, railroads and law firms for years, but they hadn't been building comedy.
Yeah.
And they kind of had their moment, and it was fine, except, and there was a lot of funny, I'm not saying it wasn't funny, but it got mean spirited to me. A lot of it got mean spirited.
Yep.
In a way that I was like, and it felt to me again like boy humor.
Did you and your dad ever talk about the style of comedy and how comedy was evolving in that time?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, all the time.
And
I mean, I don't know if we got granular about that piece of it, but
yeah.
I'll tell you here, for instance, why didn't he manage Bruce? Because my father he wouldn't work anybody who worked blue.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
That's how much he was known as the gentleman manager.
Yeah.
Now he also said, I said, but Dad, he didn't just work blue. He was a genius. He goes, yeah, I can recognize that. I didn't disagree with him.
But just like Seinfeld, not my gift. That's not my,
gift.
That's not my, yeah.
I don't want to deal with it. And he was right, because he wouldn't have done anything for that. First of all, the guy was an addict.
Yeah.
you know, and my father, it just would never have, it was not going to make great things happen for either of them. But he could see the brains and the talent and the genius, and he would never deny. When people would say later on, I mean, I was mad at him when I was a kid. I was pissed that he didn't. Why didn't he manage the Beatles? Right? You're gonna be a big manager. And why didn't you manage Lenny Bruce? That would be cool.
Yeah.
Once I read the biography, and
Oh yeah. Yeah. With Joan Rivers worked blue though, right?
No, she really didn't.
In the club, she didn't. Okay, I always wondered that about her, because she always seemed to be right on the edge of it anyway. But yeah, that's
in front of my father. You didn't say fuck. You just didn't. The comics would. I mean, you might on stage, but you didn't. It wasn't the joke. He liked writers, really.
Yeah.
I mean, he understood that the great comics were writers. That they could do more than just.
Well, it brings me back to Woody. Like I love watching Woody Allen stand up. I love watching his stand up. And then and you talk about, okay, now here's where he nurtured and helped send him over to being more the writer, the filmmaker.
Right.
as opposed to the stand up. You know, even as an actor, of
Right.
course. I mean, his comedic timing is fantastic and all of these things. Like Dave didn't want to be Dave Letterman. Also, I would compare the two. Dave was a broadcaster, a flat out
Right.
broadcaster
Right.
who learned the discipline of stand up and happened to have a razor sharp wit and the timing that is of the gods. Like, you know, oh my God, the comedy gods blessed him with timing and wit. But at the end of the day, the heart of it, he's a broadcaster, and some of these, it feels like a similar conversation with Woody, you know, where, okay, yeah, you have the discipline of stand up, but you're going to use it for so much more. And even as you
Well, in
perform.
Woody's case, Woody was already using it for so much more.
Yeah.
I mean, Woody was a paid writer when he was 17, 18 years old.
That's true too. Yeah. He already was a writer. Yeah.
He left a very lucrative writing job where he was making good money
Yep.
for those days for a young man without a college. He didn't finish college or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
He left it to do stand up and make $200 a week, if that.
Yeah.
And it was a risk. I mean, he had a wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that so I think that that Woody saw himself. I think my father's genius was to say, I think Woody was, well, the way I always interpreted and heard it was that he was a writer and he was frustrated because he was really not getting the actors and stand-ups to do the joke the way he heard it. So at some level, he could write for them, but he also could write, like, he also had a vision, right?
Yeah.
For the funny, and wasn't a performer, he thought, but he really was, because he'd come to my parents and he would read them stuff he'd written, and they'd be peeing on the floor because the material was funny, but also his delivery was funny because he was Woody, because he was uncomfortable and he was neurotic, and he was, you know, before he was Woody.
Yep.
And he kept saying, "You've got to do this in front of people," and Woody was like, "Really?" You know.
How do you compare Woody Allen and Larry David?
Well, let me just finish this. I will say,
please finish. Sorry. Yeah, please do.
But
please
I
do.
will say that I think that Woody also probably always saw himself as a filmmaker.
Okay.
Desirous of that being the ultimate, because intellectually and spiritually, Woody is very artiste driven, even though he's funny and probably on the spectrum and whatever else is going on. He you know, he himself has wide, you know, a deep interest in filmic stuff. Clearly,
he saw other dimensions of presentation. He saw multiple dimensions of it.
I think he knew that. I don't think he knew what it was, but I think he had that young artist genius thing of like, this ain't it, kid.
Yeah.
And so he was willing to explore what Jack Rollins said, which is, because by then my father had made a star. You know, he had developed a few people like Nichols and May.
Yeah.
And Woody was in that same vein of genius and not fitting into the norm, or necessarily like, what's the slot for that? Are you a writer? Are you a stand-up? Are you an actor?
Yep.
Are you a director? As with Nichols and May, it turned out what Nichols really wanted to do was direct movies, damn it. And he did a damn good job of it. You know, you can't argue with that. But there was nothing like the Nichols and May sketches.
The comedy duo. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Never been. None of the other duos compared, in my opinion. So
Letterman,
I think Steve is the
go
same
ahead.
sort of thing. I would just say that I think that Woody's development again makes sense retrospectively, and maybe together they knew that without knowing it consciously.
That makes so much sense. Woody and Larry David, would you comparative similar, a lot of similarities there in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, you know, sure. Except that, I mean, their personalities, I think, are very different.
Yep.
Just as people.
Yep.
But I think they're sort of self-created authorship of their own personal auterness or brand or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
it's not dissimilar, you
And they've,
know?
to marry to Letterman too, they also all have a degree of awkwardness to them, including
Yes,
Dave. Dave also had that awkwardness, which they could almost guide like a tool, like use as a tool to make the audience feel something. I just feel like awkwardness is something that is it's might not necessarily, like, you take projects like The Office or things like that, and where they use it as a,
right,
it's the helm of the ship is awkwardness, but
right.
to see a stand-up or a broadcaster or someone use that tool the way that they can, I feel like all three of them share that
That's really a
ability.
good point. I never even thought of that, but I think that's really a good point. I think it's a lot of it is, um, you know, just in terms of kind of psychological and entertainment theory, the audience needs a cathexis with somebody, right? It's
I
you
don't
have
know the word. I wish I did. Can you say it again, please?
a connection.
Okay.
So catharsis is where
A cathexis?
yeah, I think it's called a cathexis.
Yeah,
If I'm
I need to, okay. I'm trying to
I'm
stamp it. I'm trying to stamp it into my long-term memory right
and I
now.
could be
That's a
wrong because
fan.
I'm a know-it-all, and half the time I'm wrong. So
Oh, if you just made the word,
you know,
I'm on board. Let's call
I know,
Webster right now. Let's make
yeah.
it happen. A
All right.
cathexis. Anyway,
I think
sorry.
it's a
I didn't mean
cathexis.
to.
But
I
anyway,
dig it.
you're projecting. You want to see you reflected in some way to make the emotional connection, right? That's
Yes.
what we do with an actor in a certain role, or with a performer. And you can do that by being the hero and the person I want to be.
Yeah.
I'll look at beauty. I'll look at, and I will look at someone who doesn't seem who can embody my own sense of awkwardness and make it okay, make it
Hmm.
safe, reflect it back, and also in a controlled way.
Yeah.
I mean, Woody changed so many lives for better or for worse. What people forget when with the scandal about the kids
Hmm.
is that a million nerdy, skinny, homely Jewish boys who were funny and insecure suddenly could date shiksa goddesses. Now, whether you think that's a good thing or not, I had 100,000 boys in my generation who were my cohort who it fucking rocked their world because it did not exist before.
Wow.
It
I
didn't
love that
exist.
perspective.
You never saw that. I mean, that's the genius of Annie Hall. He was sexy.
Yeah.
Woody's not sexy in most people's ideal.
Yeah.
He was the anti-hero of comedy. And he always got the girl, and she was younger and pretty and a six the goddess. We hate that, but we love it.
um,
And it doesn't play as well anymore, but it did at the time.
well, yeah, and now what we're talking,
It was cultural.
it's 40 years old now, right? Probably more than that now I think about it. It's
I mean,
probably,
that movie plays
yeah.
well, but I mean that
Oh, the idea. I see.
idea, I mean, people now want to say about Woody, could he stop at 79 having a 25-year-old girlfriend on screen? It's enough already. And, they're not wrong in a lot of respects. As my daughter would say, they are not wrong.
Um, just a couple more Letterman questions for this first, and this is the first, like not telling tales out of school. You and I are buds. We're gonna do this more often, and there's more to come. There is more to come. There's stuff happening in the background, and we're excited about it. I just have to. I got to go pick up my granddaughter, and so I got to go do
Yeah.
that. Your dad had an office in 30 Rock.
No.
He didn't
Oh,
have an.
yeah,
Okay.
he did.
Yeah.
I think he did. My father had an office on 57th Street that was his home.
Yes.
And so I think when they were, by the time in the many incarnations of the show, part of his deal was that he probably had an office at 30 Rock, but I don't
Yep.
think, and he would go in when he had to, but I don't know that he spent. I think I was there once or twice. It was
Okay.
not his.
And the reason I'm saying that is because I knew the answer to that question, folks. That was one of the ones where I actually knew the answer to the question. The life of Jack Rollins was gigantic. It was really, really big. We kind of started shedding the light into it here today, but I got to tell you, Hillary, there are so many writers from back then. I ask about Jack when we have an episode focused on the late night years. I ask about Jack almost every single time with every single guest. And one of the things that I love about the connections that you kind of made today is there are so many folks who worked for that production in all sorts of capacities. When I ask them that question, they say, you know what? Yeah, he came in and he sat me down and he gave me all this advice and it absolutely changed my life, or it was profound, or it was that they use, oh, his wisdom. He was so wise. I've heard that a lot. And he didn't go to his office at 30 Rock that often, like you're talking about how, but as opposed to his office on, his main office. I'm
Right.
saying, I'm not saying he didn't go there a lot. I'm saying
Right,
that,
right.
comparatively, he had a lot of stuff going on in his world. And you and I have done a really, really good job of talking about this. And we're going to go further down the rabbit hole. We're going to have Francesca on here. She's going to talk about it. But your dad, I mean, the amount of people that he influenced and the amount of people that he, didn't manage, but he directed them,
Right.
or he did manage them. It is such a massive number. The 100th birthday party that was put on for him, of course, his funeral, people still are talking about his funeral and it's how many years after, 9 years after the fact, something like that. And they're still talking about his funeral. Your dad was a legend. And I'm so grateful that you know that. And I'm so grateful, that he was part of this Letterman universe that we love so much. Dave surrounded himself with, it was weird. Like you said, he had a lot of these, the pipeline from the Harvard writers and whatnot. He had some of these old school writers with him, and then he had old showbiz people around him like Hal Gurney and like Jack Rollins. And it was such a neat alchemy having that, and having your dad, painting a picture of who your dad was, knowing that he was Dave's manager at the time, of Dave's ascension. That is a really, really neat place to be. And I'm really grateful that you've taken time to come here and talk about this with me, I should say. And I look forward to more. So if there's anything that you want to say, like to close up this episode here, is there anything, what I just said there, that sprung anything
No,
up for you?
it's really beautiful to hear, and I really appreciate that. And it lands for me so differently today than it would have at another time. So I'm grateful to you.
Oh, well,
And I can't wait to do it again, because I gotta get this stuff out
yes.
and move
Yes.
on.
Well, there's a lot more to
Does
come.
feel like I'm fulfilling, one of these are a lot of bucket list things, and
Yeah.
having this conversation about, I finally realized, wherever I am in my life in show business, I lived through stuff that only I have that version of it. Other people have other versions, and I'm not going to live forever either. And just want to talk to people who want to remember what it was for archival purposes as much as anything else. And it's also, they're dead and gone and you miss them, even though they drove you crazy. You only have one good parents.
This is the way we keep it alive, and we're going to do a lot more of that. I'm going to say my outro right now. Just please stay on. We'll say our goodbye privately, buddy, and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much for coming on the Letterman podcast today. The first of lots more to come. Okay, that's those who have watched this thing from the very beginning. Number one, what's wrong with you? Number two, that this conversation and the ones like this are the things that drive me forward. I love talking about this, and Hillary and I could do this all day. We will do it all day. There are lots of other venues that are coming. We're gonna have Francesca on to talk a little bit about her experience. She actually interned at the show and whatnot. But I'm really glad we started with Hillary here to talk about Jack Rollins. And I've been wanting to do a tribute show to him for a long time. This is the first. And we're going to go from there. The Letterman podcast has one sponsor only right now. That's hello-deli.com. Rupert may not own the deli anymore, but he still has hello-deli.com. Get yourself some official Late Show with David Letterman merchandise. Hats, mugs, t-shirts, all that crap. Go for it. Thank you very much. This has been another episode of the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. Coincidentally, I am Mike Chisholm. Thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.